Hi, everybody. Steve Albrecht from the SafeLibrary.com and Library20.com with Layla, the Wonder Dog, talking about a question I got at a webinar I did just the other day about metal detectors in the library. I'm not a fan of them. It sends a message to the community that at least their perception is this place is not safe. I did a conversation that I had with Winnipeg Library director after they had a stabbing that involved a homicide in their library in Winnipeg. A patron was killed by 3 or 4 other kids. They're teenagers, like 14, 15, 16 years old, killed this man with a knife. And they put into the Winnipeg Library metal detectors, and it caused a big controversy in the community. And there was a lot of pros and cons being argued in the newspapers and other places about the efficacy and value and use of metal detectors. I understand the need for them at the airport and at sporting events and at concerts and courthouses and hospitals and things like that. But in the library, I don't see the need for them. The message it sends to the community is this is not a safe place for me or my kids, or if I'm a senior coming in here. I would rather use vigilance by the staff. I'd rather use no weapons policies, no weapons signage outside and inside, maybe even lockers for people to put their personal belongings, including weapons, if they don't want to bring them inside the library. I realize we can't control people's behavior in terms of what they bring in, and we're going on kind of the honor system. But the other part is maybe that the money that's spent on metal detectors instead of staff vigilance and policy, we should use for security guards. And the problem with metal detectors, at least in my perspective, and having installed them in high security places, is in a perfect world, you need an armed officer who's trained, tactically trained, to be able to respond to anybody bringing a firearm into the facility or threatening that person with a knife. If you don't have an armed security officer at the metal detector, it's pretty useless. It's not valuable to the organization, and it puts the security officer at risk as well. We don't need to have 5 armed guards at the metal detector, but 1 is necessary to screen. Sometimes what we have seen is that someone would do the screening who is unarmed and have an armed security officer nearby to watch the process. That's the same thing we've seen sometimes in courthouses. We'll have armed deputies or armed marshals or armed security that support the people that are operating the metal detector who don't have to be armed. If you're not going to do that, then it's much more difficult to do. So when I look at the concept of metal detectors, it's oftentimes an overreaction, sometimes driven by the media, sometimes driven by elected officials who want to be seen as doing something proactive and oftentimes provocative around security. I'm not a big fan of the idea, although I understand why people do it. I wouldn't suggest it for libraries. So until next time, and for Squirmy Layla, thanks everybody.